Welcome to History Teller YT, your window into the untold stories of the past. Today, we bring you an extraordinary journey into the life, struggles, and resilience of the Subanen people, one of the most remarkable indigenous communities in the Philippines. From their peaceful ways and deep connection to the land, to their centuries-long fight to protect their ancestral domains, their culture, and their rights, this story is not just about history. It's about wisdom, unity, and the strength that comes from standing together. In this video, you'll experience the Subanen's journey across generations, how they survived colonial encounters, wartime upheavals, modern development pressures, discrimination, and environmental challenges, while preserving their identity, traditions, and dignity. Every chapter reveals lessons of patience, courage, and moral integrity that we can all learn from. So stay with us, because this is more than a story. It's a full account of a people whose peace-loving nature is matched only by their unyielding spirit. Let's dive into the world of the Subanen, here on History Teller YT. The Subanen people trace their ancestry to the ancient highlands and river valleys of what is now the Zamboanga Peninsula in Mindanao, Philippines. Long before colonial maps and modern political divisions, the Subanen had already carved out a way of life harmonized with nature. Their settlements were often located along the fertile banks of rivers and streams, providing both sustenance and protection. The name Subanen itself comes from Suba, meaning river, reflecting the community's intrinsic connection to waterways that shaped their culture, economy, and worldview. Families lived in close-knit communities, each household working collectively to cultivate rice terraces, tend livestock, and gather forest resources. Oral traditions tell of ancestors who followed the rivers from distant highlands, seeking land that could sustain life and foster social harmony. These early Subanen were not isolated. Trade routes, kinship networks, and cultural exchanges linked them with neighboring peoples. Despite occasional conflicts with other ethnic groups, their guiding principle was always one of coexistence and respect. The Subanen's origin story, passed down through generations, emphasizes the importance of balance between man and nature, between communities, and between the spiritual and material worlds. Ancestors were revered, and rituals honoring the spirits of rivers, forests, and ancestors were integral to daily life. Through this deep connection to their ancestral lands, the Subanen developed an enduring sense of identity, one rooted in respect, patience, and community cohesion. The Subanen people developed a social structure that emphasized collective responsibility and harmony. Their communities were typically led by a datu, a chief whose role was not only political but spiritual. The datu mediated conflicts, ensured fair distribution of resources, and maintained relationships with neighboring communities. Leadership was respected but not absolute. Council elders often advised the datu, ensuring decisions reflected communal consensus. Families were the backbone of Subanen society, and extended kinship networks played crucial roles in both daily life and ceremonial activities. Villages were strategically organized, with communal houses arranged to foster interaction and cooperation. Rituals were central to marking life stages, from birth and marriage to harvest celebrations and ancestral commemorations. Music, dance, and storytelling were not merely entertainment. They were a means of preserving history, teaching moral values, and reinforcing collective memory. The Subanen also had a sophisticated understanding of agriculture and environmental management. By cultivating rice terraces along riverbanks and employing rotational farming, they ensured sustainable yields while respecting the land. Hunting, fishing, and gathering forest products complemented agricultural efforts, creating a self-sufficient and resilient community. These early social practices highlight the Subanen's enduring commitment to harmony, cooperation, and respect for both people and the environment, a philosophy that continues to guide them today. The Subanen worldview is deeply spiritual, blending animism with ritual practices that honor both ancestors and natural forces. They believe that spirits inhabit rivers, forests, and mountains, and that humans must live in balance with these forces to ensure health, prosperity, and harmony. Ritual specialists, known as balyan, guide communities in ceremonies that seek protection, healing, and guidance from the spiritual world. Storytelling, songs, and dances are essential components of these rituals, preserving not just spiritual beliefs, but also historical narratives and moral teachings. Cultural identity for the Subanen is inseparable from their ancestral domain. Land is not merely a commodity. It embodies life, history, and dignity. Each river, hill, and forest carries the memory of ancestors and the legacy of communal survival. This spiritual and cultural attachment underlies their steadfast resistance to external encroachments and exploitation. Over centuries, the Subanen developed a unique artistic expression, reflected in woven textiles, decorative carvings, and musical instruments, all of which carry symbolic meanings tied to their heritage. Through these artistic and spiritual practices, the Subanen maintain a continuous link between past and present, ensuring that each generation internalizes the values of peace, respect, and unity that define their people. In the centuries before foreign colonization, the Subanen maintained complex relationships with neighboring ethnic groups in Mindanao. To the north and west, they interacted with the Yakin and Tausig people, while to the east, Maguindanao communities shared riverine corridors with them. These relationships were governed by a delicate balance of trade, alliance, and occasional conflict. Trade was an essential aspect of Subanen life. Rivers and trails became natural highways for the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. They bartered forest products such as rattan, honey, and medicinal plants in exchange for textiles, metal tools, and ceramics. These exchanges were not merely economic. They reinforced social bonds, intermarriage alliances, and mutual respect among communities. However, the Subanen were always cautious of outsiders, guided by a principle that kindness must be met with honesty. If deception or exploitation occurred, disputes were resolved through council deliberation or ceremonial restitution. This system of interaction allowed the Subanen to thrive in a region often marked by shifting power dynamics. Their settlements expanded gradually along fertile river valleys, with families moving strategically to ensure access to arable land, freshwater, and forest resources. While expansion brought new opportunities, it also required careful negotiation with neighboring groups. In every transaction and alliance, the Subanen sought to maintain harmony and balance, values that became the foundation of their enduring peace-loving reputation. Their ability to navigate these social landscapes while preserving cultural integrity demonstrates the Subanen's resilience and wisdom in sustaining community life amid both opportunity and challenge. The Subanen's mastery of agriculture was central to their survival and prosperity. Unlike other societies that relied solely on monoculture, the Subanen practiced mixed farming, integrating rice cultivation with root crops, vegetables, and fruit trees. They ingeniously designed irrigation systems along riverbanks and terraces to maximize water efficiency, demonstrating profound ecological knowledge. Forests were not viewed as obstacles, but as shared resources, carefully managed for timber, firewood, medicinal plants, and food. Seasonal cycles guided planting, harvesting, and hunting, ensuring that natural resources were neither depleted nor overused. Hunting techniques, fishing practices, and gathering were regulated by customary laws that emphasized respect for wildlife and ecosystem balance. For instance, certain rivers were declared off-limits during fish breeding seasons, and particular trees were preserved due to their spiritual significance. This combination of practical knowledge and ethical stewardship created a resilient food system that could withstand environmental fluctuations. The Subanen's ecological approach also extended to conflict prevention. By cultivating cooperation rather than competition, communities avoided disputes over land and resources. Social cohesion, coupled with sustainable agricultural practices, ensured that both human and environmental needs were met in harmony. In essence, the Subanen developed a sophisticated model of resource management long before modern environmental science emerged, illustrating that their peace-loving nature was intricately linked to ecological wisdom and long-term survival strategies. Cultural life among the Subanen was inseparable from their spiritual and practical existence. Rituals marked important life events, from birth and marriage to community harvests and ancestral commemorations. The balyan, or spiritual leader, played a central role in guiding these ceremonies, offering counsel, healing, and connection to the spiritual world. Music, chants, and dance were used not only for celebration but for education, passing down historical knowledge and moral lessons. Storytelling reinforced values such as honesty, respect, and cooperation, ensuring that each generation internalized the principles of peace and communal solidarity. Artisanship, particularly weaving, beadwork, and wood carving, carried symbolic meanings tied to these values. Patterns in textiles often represented family lineages or ancestral stories, while carvings were used in homes, ritual sites, and communal spaces to signify identity and protection. Through these practices, the Subanen created a cultural ecosystem where daily life, spiritual beliefs, and communal responsibility were deeply intertwined. This cultural sophistication allowed the Subanen to maintain social cohesion, safeguard their resources, and cultivate a collective identity that could endure both internal challenges and external pressures. It also laid the groundwork for their steadfast response to later colonial encroachments and modern legal struggles, demonstrating that the Subanen's history is one of resilience rooted in both culture and principle. The 16th and 17th centuries marked the beginning of foreign intrusion in Mindanao, as Spanish colonial forces expanded their influence across the Philippine archipelago. For the Subanen, these incursions were gradual but disruptive. Spanish expeditions sought to consolidate power by establishing settlements, introducing Catholicism, and controlling trade routes. Unlike the lowland societies that often faced immediate colonization, the Subanen Highland communities initially experienced a mix of curiosity and caution toward these foreigners. Reports from early missionaries and explorers noted Subanen villages along rivers and upland areas, describing them as organized, peaceful, and highly protective of their lands. The Subanen were receptive to trade and dialogue, but refused to relinquish autonomy or allow outsiders to dictate the terms of life within their ancestral domain. This principled resistance often led to misunderstandings. Spaniards, unfamiliar with Subanen customs and governance, sometimes interpreted their caution as defiance or hostility. Meanwhile, the Subanen evaluated these foreign actors carefully, seeking to maintain their way of life without compromising cultural values. The early encounters were therefore marked by a delicate balance. The Subanen sought to understand the newcomers, while the Spanish aimed to assert authority, resulting in occasional skirmishes and tension. Despite the looming threat of colonial domination, the Subanen remained committed to peace, using negotiation, strategic alliances, and community cohesion as their first line of defense. Their approach was guided by the enduring principle that strength lies in unity and wisdom, not in violence alone. As Spanish influence expanded, the Subanen faced increasing pressure to submit to colonial laws, pay tributes, and accept foreign religious practices. However, rather than succumbing, the Subanen developed strategies to protect their cultural identity and territorial rights. They relocated villages to more defensible areas, often deeper within river valleys or upland forests, and reinforced social cohesion through councils of elders and a datu. These leaders coordinated responses to external pressures, ensuring that decisions reflected the consensus of the community. While some Subanen selectively adopted aspects of Spanish culture, such as material goods or certain agricultural techniques, they did so without compromising core beliefs, traditions, or spiritual practices. Oral histories recount acts of both subtle and direct resistance. Communities hid sacred sites from intruders, preserved ancestral rituals in secret, and maintained control over their land despite colonial records attempting to assert Spanish ownership. This period highlighted the Subanen's remarkable capacity for adaptation. Rather than fighting indiscriminately, they used knowledge of terrain, local alliances, and diplomacy to protect life and liberty. Their ability to integrate useful innovations without surrendering identity illustrates a sophisticated understanding of cultural survival, an approach that ensured that, even under colonial pressure, the Subanen remained masters of their destiny, guiding future generations in the values of resilience, patience, and respect for both people and land. Despite external threats, the Subanen preserved cultural continuity through ritual, art, and education within the family and community. Ceremonies conducted by the balyan continued to mark life events and connect the people to their spiritual world. Traditional weaving, carving, and music flourished as symbols of identity, transmitting knowledge from elders to youth. The Subanen developed storytelling as a powerful tool for teaching moral values and documenting history. Stories recounted not only ancestral origins, but also lessons learned during encounters with outsiders, embedding survival strategies within moral narratives. Education was informal but rigorous. Children learned to respect elders, honor ancestors, and maintain harmony with nature. These practices became critical in resisting assimilation, ensuring that despite Spanish influence, the Subanen worldview endured. Even as missionaries attempted to convert communities, the Subanen maintained a duality. They engaged selectively with new beliefs and technologies while preserving spiritual and cultural sovereignty. The community's attachment to ancestral land, rivers, forests, and hills remained paramount. It was more than territory. It was a living archive of history, culture, and identity. Protecting this land became both a moral and practical imperative, forging a collective consciousness that emphasized justice, dignity, and the unyielding defense of ancestral rights. By the end of this era, the Subanen had established a blueprint for survival under duress. Combine wisdom with restraint, leverage unity over confrontation, and always prioritize the continuity of culture, identity, and ancestral connection. At the turn of the 20th century, the Philippines transitioned from Spanish to American control, and the Subanen people once again found themselves navigating the pressures of foreign governance. Unlike the Spanish, the Americans implemented a centralized colonial administration, introducing new political, economic, and educational systems. For the Subanen, this represented both challenge and opportunity. Early American surveys recorded Subanen settlements along rivers and upland areas, noting the resilience and organization of their communities. While the Spanish had attempted to impose Catholicism and collect tributes, the Americans focused on integrating indigenous populations into a national administrative framework. Roads, schools, and public offices gradually appeared in the region, but these developments often came without genuine consultation with the Subanen communities. The people observed these changes carefully, wary of promises that could undermine their autonomy. At the same time, American authorities were fascinated by Subanen culture, documenting traditional rituals, crafts, and oral histories. This period also coincided with broader efforts to establish census and land registration systems, which were often poorly understood by indigenous communities. The Subanen faced a critical choice: engage with the new colonial system to gain access to resources and legal recognition, or resist in order to protect ancestral lands and traditions. History shows that they navigated this challenge with a characteristic combination of wisdom, patience, and principled resistance, ensuring that engagement never meant surrendering identity or rights. Their approach highlights the enduring Subanen philosophy: peace is not weakness, and dialogue can coexist with steadfast defense of one's heritage. During the American period, formal education became one of the primary tools for colonial influence. Schools were introduced in Subanen regions, often emphasizing English language, Western values, and American civics. While some Subanen families saw the benefit of literacy and new skills, there was a growing awareness of the risks of cultural erosion. Children educated exclusively in foreign systems could lose connection with ancestral knowledge, spiritual practices, and traditional agricultural expertise. To counter this, communities developed informal methods of education. Elders continued to teach children through storytelling, songs, and rituals, ensuring that traditional wisdom and communal values were preserved alongside Western learning. Simultaneously, the Subanen remained vigilant about external exploitation of their land. Timber, minerals, and river resources increasingly attracted commercial interests, and communities faced pressures to sell or cede territory. Unlike armed uprisings in other regions, the Subanen employed legal, social, and cultural strategies to resist encroachment. Councils of elders and local leaders reinforced community unity, negotiated with outsiders, and ensured that development projects could not proceed without consent. This dual strategy of selective engagement and steadfast resistance became a defining feature of Subanen survival. Education, whether formal or traditional, was a means not only to navigate the colonial world, but also to strengthen identity, teaching future generations the values of patience, negotiation, and communal responsibility, which were essential in protecting both people and land. Even as the American period brought roads, schools, and administrative structures, the Subanen maintained vibrant cultural continuity. Rituals led by the balyan remained central to community life, anchoring the people spiritually and socially. Festivals, marriages, and harvest ceremonies were conducted with careful adherence to ancestral protocols, even when outsiders observed. Art and craftsmanship thrived, particularly weaving, beadwork, and wood carving, which continued to carry symbolic meanings tied to lineage, land, and ancestral wisdom. The oral traditions served as both history and pedagogy. Stories of ancestors, river spirits, and historical encounters reinforced values of respect, unity, and resilience. These practices also functioned as subtle resistance. While the Americans encouraged assimilation, the Subanen preserved a distinctly indigenous worldview, integrating necessary innovations without surrendering identity. Land remained the most sacred link to cultural survival. Access to rivers, upland forests, and communal territories was guarded with care, ensuring that economic or administrative pressures did not disrupt ecological or social balance. By the end of the American period, the Subanen had achieved a delicate equilibrium. They interacted with a modernizing world without losing the core of their heritage. Their experience during this era reinforced a crucial lesson for future generations. Peace and kindness must be paired with vigilance and legal awareness, for identity and dignity are most strongly preserved when communities act with unity, wisdom, and strategic foresight. The Japanese occupation of the Philippines during World War II brought unprecedented challenges to the Subanen people. In the early 1940s, Japanese forces advanced through Mindanao, seeking to control strategic resources and establish dominance over indigenous and lowland communities alike. The Subanen, who had long maintained autonomy and self-sufficiency, suddenly faced a foreign military presence that threatened both their lives and ancestral domains. Unlike urban centers where military occupation often meant immediate enforcement of policies, the Subanen Highland communities initially had some buffer due to their remote and riverine settlements. However, reports from this period indicate that Japanese troops conducted reconnaissance missions, seeking supplies, forced labor, and local compliance. For the Subanen, who valued peace but never tolerated abuse, these incursions were met with careful resistance. Communities relied on their deep knowledge of the terrain, using forests, rivers, and upland trails to hide families, protect sacred sites, and safeguard food sources. The Japanese were unfamiliar with local customs, which sometimes led to tense standoffs. Yet, the Subanen strategy was never one of reckless confrontation. Instead, they prioritized survival, community cohesion, and the protection of their ancestral lands. By understanding the occupiers' intentions while preserving internal solidarity, the Subanen demonstrated that wisdom and patience could serve as powerful tools even in the face of armed aggression. During the occupation, the Subanen relied heavily on traditional governance structures to maintain social order and resilience. The Datu and Council of Elders coordinated defensive strategies, ensured equitable distribution of resources, and mediated disputes intensified by the pressures of wartime scarcity. Villages implemented rotation systems for farming and foraging to avoid detection, while rituals led by the balyan provided spiritual reassurance and reinforced communal unity. Covert resistance also became a necessity. While many Subanen avoided direct military confrontation, some assisted guerrilla groups or facilitated intelligence networks that supported the broader Philippine resistance movement. These acts of quiet heroism often went unrecorded in official accounts, but were remembered in oral histories and storytelling, becoming part of the community's moral legacy. Even in survival, the Subanen adhered to principles of justice and respect. They shared resources with vulnerable neighbors, ensured protection for children and elders, and upheld traditional dispute resolution methods. These practices illustrate the remarkable adaptability of the Subanen. Their commitment to peace did not prevent them from defending life and territory, nor did the threat of foreign occupation diminish their capacity for strategic decision-making. By the end of the Japanese occupation, communities that successfully combined caution, unity, and cultural continuity emerged stronger, with lessons of resilience deeply embedded for subsequent generations. Wartime conditions threatened not only physical survival, but also cultural preservation. The Subanen faced the risk of losing rituals, oral traditions, and artisanal practices due to displacement, scarcity, and fear of detection. Yet, even under duress, the people found ways to safeguard their heritage. Ceremonial rites, often simplified for practicality, continued to mark key life events, reinforcing spiritual and social continuity. Music, Chants and dances were adapted to small, private gatherings, allowing children to learn ancestral stories without drawing attention from occupying forces. Artisans continued weaving, carving, and creating symbolic artifacts, ensuring that cultural knowledge remained vibrant despite wartime hardships. The Subanen's attachment to ancestral lands proved especially crucial. Forests, rivers, and sacred sites not only provided food and shelter, but also acted as living archives of history and identity. By maintaining access to these spaces, the people ensured that the essence of Subanen culture survived even when external pressures threatened to erase it. Moreover, wartime experience reinforced communal values of cooperation, patience, and strategic foresight, principles that would inform the Subanen's post-war engagement with government policies, land rights, and modernization efforts. In this period, the Subanen demonstrated a remarkable balance. Survival and resistance were intertwined with cultural preservation, ensuring that peace-loving yet resilient principles endured even in the darkest chapters of history. After the devastation of World War II and the Japanese occupation, the Subanen people faced the monumental task of rebuilding their communities. Many villages had been displaced or partially destroyed, farmland was damaged, and infrastructure such as river crossings, bridges, and irrigation systems required extensive repair. Despite these challenges, the Subanen demonstrated remarkable resilience. Families returned to ancestral lands, often navigating dangerous terrain to reclaim territory that had been neglected or temporarily abandoned. Communal labor became the foundation of reconstruction, with neighbors coming together to rebuild homes, repair terraces, and restore essential irrigation networks. The Datu and Council of Elders coordinated reconstruction efforts, ensuring equitable allocation of resources and maintaining social cohesion. Spiritual leaders, or balyan, provided guidance and healing, organizing rituals to honor ancestors and seek protection for the rebuilding process. This period reinforced the importance of unity, patience, and careful planning, values that had guided the Subanen through centuries of external pressure. Rebuilding was not simply physical, it was also cultural. Communities re-established ceremonies, storytelling, and traditional crafts, ensuring that despite the trauma of war, the essence of Subanen identity remained intact. These efforts demonstrated that recovery was not solely about survival. It was about restoring dignity, continuity, and a deep connection to the land that had sustained them for generations. As the Philippines transitioned to independence in 1946, the Subanen increasingly engaged with legal frameworks to protect ancestral lands and assert rights that had long been part of their customary law. Post-war reconstruction coincided with growing awareness that government policies often overlooked indigenous land tenure, resulting in encroachments by settlers, logging companies, and commercial enterprises. In response, the Subanen began organizing at the community level, documenting ancestral domains, and establishing formal claims to lands that had been continuously occupied and cultivated for generations. Oral traditions and genealogical records became crucial in this process, serving as evidence of long-standing habitation and stewardship. Elders, Datu, and legal advocates worked together to educate younger generations about rights, negotiation strategies, and legal recourse. These efforts laid the groundwork for future legislation, including the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA, of 1997. The Subanen's approach emphasized both vigilance and patience. While some communities engaged with government authorities to assert claims, others maintained distance to prevent exploitation or misunderstanding. This dual strategy reflected an enduring principle of Subanen governance. Engagement must always be balanced with caution, and legal and social mechanisms are as important as physical defense in protecting life, land, and culture. The post-war era was a defining moment for Subanen culture as communities worked to strengthen identity while navigating modernity. Rituals led by the balyan continued to anchor the spiritual life of the people, marking events such as planting, harvesting, births, and marriages. Ceremonial practices were meticulously maintained, reinforcing ancestral knowledge, moral values, and social cohesion. Storytelling remained a vital educational tool, with elders recounting historical encounters with colonial and wartime powers, emphasizing lessons of resilience, strategic patience, and communal solidarity. Artistic expression flourished, particularly in weaving, beadwork, and carving, which were imbued with historical and symbolic significance. These practices were not merely decorative. They functioned as repositories of knowledge, ethics, and identity. Importantly, cultural preservation became intertwined with the fight for land rights. By maintaining rituals, ancestral knowledge, and territorial stewardship, the Subanen demonstrated an unbroken connection to their domain, reinforcing legal and moral claims to land that external authorities could neither erase nor fully comprehend. Through this period, the Subanen proved that resilience is not only about survival in the face of hardship, but also about safeguarding cultural integrity, spiritual continuity, and communal dignity, ensuring that future generations would inherit both the land and the wisdom necessary to defend it. In the decades following the post-war Reconstruction era, the Subanen people faced increasing pressures from logging, mining, and large-scale development projects. Government and private enterprises, often driven by economic interests, sought access to the rich forests and mineral resources that lay within Subanen ancestral domains. For the Subanen, these lands were far more than economic assets. They were sacred spaces, repositories of culture, history, and identity. Rivers, hills, and forests were intimately connected to their rituals, spiritual beliefs, and subsistence practices. Logging operations threatened not only the ecological balance, but also the social and cultural fabric of Subanen communities. Trees that had been used for generations in construction, crafts, and ceremonial artifacts were cut indiscriminately. Rivers became polluted with debris and chemicals, affecting fishing and agriculture. Mining projects disrupted sacred sites and ancestral burial grounds, generating conflict between economic development goals and indigenous rights. Despite these challenges, the Subanen employed strategic resistance, relying on community unity, documentation of ancestral claims, and appeals to both local and national authorities. They sought to negotiate terms that would allow for sustainable resource use without sacrificing cultural integrity, emphasizing that true development cannot occur at the expense of life, identity, and heritage. Faced with these encroachments, the Subanen became increasingly aware of the power of law in protecting ancestral domains. The introduction of Philippine legislation recognizing indigenous rights created opportunities for legal mobilization. The Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA, of 1997, or Republic Act 8371, explicitly recognized the rights of indigenous communities to their ancestral lands, ownership, and control over resources. Sections 7, 59, and 72 of the Act provided mechanisms for free, prior, and informed consent, FPSC, ensuring that no project could legally proceed without the agreement of the community. Subanen leaders, elders, and legal advocates worked diligently to educate their communities on these provisions, teaching not only the content of the law, but also strategies for asserting rights effectively. Legal battles were often complex, involving government agencies, corporations, and other stakeholders. Nevertheless, the Subanen relied on unity and collective memory to present documented evidence of continuous habitation, cultural practices, and ancestral stewardship. This legal mobilization marked a significant evolution in the Subanen strategy of resistance. While historically reliant on negotiation, diplomacy, and community cohesion, modern advocacy added formal legal channels as a powerful tool to defend rights and secure justice. By understanding and utilizing the law, the Subanen could enforce protection of their lands and resources without resorting to violence, staying true to their identity as peace-loving but resolute people. Beyond legal strategies, the Subanen emphasized community solidarity as a key instrument of resilience. Elders, youth, and families worked together to document ancestral territories, record genealogies, and map sacred and resource-rich sites. Spiritual leaders continued to guide communities in ritual and ceremony, reinforcing the moral imperative to protect the land. Education became a tool of empowerment, with elders teaching younger generations the importance of cultural knowledge, ecological stewardship, and strategic vigilance. Music, dance, and storytelling continued to serve as vehicles for transmitting history, values, and practical lessons in negotiation and resistance. Social cohesion proved critical in responding to external pressures, ensuring that communities could act collectively in asserting rights, negotiating with authorities, and maintaining sustainable livelihoods. Through these efforts, the Subanen not only defended their ancestral domains, but also strengthened their identity, demonstrating that culture, law, and unity are inseparable in the fight for justice. In this era, the Subanen philosophy became clear. Peace and kindness are powerful, but when abused, the law and collective action amplify strength. Their story illustrates how indigenous communities can navigate the challenges of modern development while preserving cultural integrity, spiritual continuity, and ancestral pride. The passage of the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA, of 1997 marked a historic moment for the Subanen and other indigenous peoples in the Philippines. After centuries of marginalization, encroachment, and exploitation, IPRA recognized the inherent rights of indigenous communities to their ancestral domains, cultural integrity, and self-governance. Sections 7, 59, and 72 were particularly significant for the Subanen. Section 7 affirmed their ownership, control, and sustainable use of ancestral lands, reinforcing traditional stewardship practices that had existed long before formal laws. Section 59 mandated free, prior, and informed consent, FPSC, for any project affecting ancestral domains, giving the Subanen legal authority to accept or reject external interventions. Section 72 imposed strict penalties, including fines and imprisonment, for violations of these rights, providing a legal mechanism to enforce justice. For the Subanen, IPRA was more than legislation. It was a validation of centuries of cultural, spiritual, and ecological practices. It recognized that the rivers, forests, and uplands they had protected for generations were not merely resources, but the foundation of life, identity, and community continuity. Legal recognition empowered the Subanen to engage with developers, government agencies, and the broader society on equal terms, reinforcing the principle that peace and dialogue must always be accompanied by respect, vigilance, and preparedness to assert rights. FPIC became the most critical tool for the Subanen in asserting control over their ancestral domains. Any proposed project, whether mining, logging, infrastructure, or commercial development, required community consultation before approval. This meant that outsiders could no longer proceed with projects based solely on permits or political influence. the Subanen had the right to deliberate collectively and make informed decisions. The process often involved multiple steps: documentation of ancestral territories, consultation with elders and community members, negotiation with project proponents, and, if necessary, legal action to halt unauthorized activity. Through FPC, the Subanen reinforced unity within their communities. Every decision required dialogue, consensus building, and collective commitment, ensuring that the community's voice was coherent and respected. Cases involving logging or mining companies illustrated the power of this mechanism. When developers attempted to bypass consultation, the Subanen invoked their rights under IPRA, filing complaints with the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, NCP, and other legal authorities. These actions were often challenging, requiring meticulous documentation, witness testimony, and legal representation, yet they proved effective in protecting ancestral lands from exploitation. FPIC not only secured tangible outcomes, but also strengthened the moral and cultural foundation of the Subanen community, demonstrating that legal empowerment and communal solidarity are inseparable in defending indigenous rights. Since the enactment of IPRA, the Subanen have achieved numerous legal victories, asserting control over their ancestral lands and preventing unauthorized projects. These successes have reinforced the importance of knowledge, unity, and strategic action in defending rights. Elders and community leaders continue to educate younger generations about the law, emphasizing that awareness and vigilance are essential to sustaining autonomy. Rituals, oral histories, and storytelling serve as complementary tools, ensuring that legal knowledge is embedded within cultural practice. At the same time, the Subanen remain cautious, recognizing that laws alone cannot guarantee protection. Vigilance is necessary because economic pressures, political changes, and external interests constantly test the integrity of ancestral domains. Communities maintain records, conduct regular monitoring of land and resources, and engage in proactive dialogue with authorities and project proponents. This approach exemplifies the Subanen principle that peace is not passive. It is an active, conscious effort to maintain harmony while protecting rights and dignity. Legal advocacy, combined with cultural resilience and community unity, has allowed the Subanen to navigate modern challenges effectively. By asserting their rights under IPRA, the Subanen demonstrate to the nation and the world that indigenous peoples are not passive subjects, but active, knowledgeable stewards of their lands, committed to peace, justice, and the preservation of cultural heritage. Even as legal protections under the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA, provided a framework for defending ancestral domains, the Subanen faced persistent discrimination in other areas of life, particularly education. Schools in nearby towns often reflected societal biases, where Subanen children were marginalized, mocked, or made to feel inferior because of their indigenous identity. Some teachers, unfamiliar with Subanen culture, treated students with condescension, assuming that indigenous children lacked intelligence or ambition. Language barriers also created significant challenges, as the Subanen traditionally spoke local dialects that were rarely included in formal instruction. Despite these obstacles, Subanen communities demonstrated remarkable resilience. Families emphasized the importance of dual education. Children would attend formal schooling to gain literacy and skills for engagement in the broader society, while elders taught indigenous knowledge, history, and cultural values at home and in community gatherings. Storytelling, songs, and ritual-based lessons reinforced identity and moral principles, allowing children to grow with both modern competencies and deep cultural grounding. Over time, some Subanen educators and advocates worked to bridge the gap between indigenous knowledge and formal curricula, integrating traditional practices environmental stewardship, and ancestral history into lessons. This proactive approach highlighted a key principle. Combating discrimination required not only legal remedies, but also cultural empowerment and educational innovation, ensuring that Subanen children could thrive academically while remaining proud of their heritage. Discrimination against the Subanen extended beyond schools, affecting access to employment, government positions, and economic opportunities. Indigenous individuals were often overlooked for jobs, promotions, or government programs because of stereotypes or assumptions about their abilities. This systemic exclusion created economic disparities and reinforced social marginalization. The Subanen responded by organizing community-based initiatives, cooperative enterprises, and small-scale businesses that leveraged local knowledge, skills, and natural resources. These ventures, ranging from sustainable agriculture to handicrafts and ecotourism, empowered communities economically while preserving cultural identity. Advocacy was also critical. Subanen leaders lobbied local governments to recognize the skills, contributions, and rights of indigenous peoples, invoking anti-discrimination laws, such as RA 11054 for IPs and BRMM and related local ordinances. Legal awareness and solidarity became essential tools. When opportunities were denied due to ethnicity, communities took collective action, filing complaints or negotiating for inclusion. These experiences reinforced the Subanen belief that dignity, respect, and equality must be actively demanded, not passively expected. Social exclusion thus became a catalyst for both legal literacy and community-driven development, highlighting the intertwined importance of culture, law, and advocacy in the ongoing struggle against discrimination. Discrimination threatened not only economic and educational opportunities, but also the Subanen's sense of identity and cultural pride. Mockery, social exclusion, and institutional neglect could erode confidence, especially among younger generations. Yet, the Subanen maintained their cultural resilience by emphasizing community solidarity, ritual practice, and storytelling. Celebrations, festivals, and communal ceremonies were deliberately designed to instill pride, educate youth about ancestral history, and reinforce the moral principles of respect, harmony, and unity. Elder-led programs taught children the significance of rivers, forests, and sacred sites, while weaving, music, and dance preserved traditional artistry and knowledge. By intertwining legal literacy, education, and cultural reinforcement, the Subanen created a comprehensive strategy against discrimination. It demonstrated that true empowerment is multifaceted. It requires understanding rights, demanding equality, and sustaining identity. These efforts were not only defensive, but also proactive, equipping future generations with the tools to navigate societal biases while contributing positively to broader society. The Subanen message is clear. Respect is earned through honesty, sincerity, and recognition of indigenous contributions. And when discrimination arises, unity, law, and cultural strength become powerful instruments of justice and resilience. For the Subanen people, ancestral domains are far more than territory. They're the living foundation of culture, identity, and survival. Rivers, forests, hills, and valleys are intimately linked to daily life, spiritual practices, and communal governance. This connection has fostered a profound understanding of ecology and resource management that predates modern environmental science. Traditional practices are based on balance, sustainability, and respect for nature. Rice terraces, agroforestry systems, and rotational farming illustrate an intricate knowledge of soil health, water management, and biodiversity. Sacred groves and protected areas, often associated with ancestral spirits, function as ecological reserves, preserving flora and fauna while ensuring long-term resource availability. The Subanen's approach to land and resource management is inseparable from their identity. Every river fished, tree harvested, or forest area cleared is guided by ritual, communal decision-making, and intergenerational knowledge transfer. This ecological consciousness also shapes their response to modern development pressures. Logging, mining, and industrial projects are not evaluated solely on economic terms, but against the broader impact on the ecosystem, social cohesion, and cultural continuity. The Subanen worldview asserts that true progress cannot be achieved at the expense of environmental degradation or the desecration of ancestral lands, a philosophy that has guided their strategies of negotiation, resistance, and collaboration in contemporary resource management. Despite centuries of careful stewardship, the Subanen face significant challenges from modern development initiatives. Commercial logging, mining concessions, and large infrastructure projects often threaten both the ecological balance and the cultural integrity of Subanen communities. Rivers become polluted with sediment and chemicals, forests are cleared without consideration for sacred sites, and wildlife populations decline due to overexploitation. These pressures generate conflicts between development goals and indigenous rights. However, the Subanen have leveraged both traditional governance and legal frameworks to assert authority over their ancestral domains. Councils of elders, led by the Datu, organize consultations and community meetings, ensuring collective decisions are made regarding engagement with developers. Free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, processes under the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act are rigorously applied to prevent project from proceeding without genuine community approval. Additionally, the Subanen combines scientific knowledge with ancestral wisdom to monitor ecosystems, assess environmental impact, and propose sustainable alternatives. By doing so, they demonstrate that indigenous stewardship is not passive conservation, but an active, knowledge-based approach to resource management that balances ecological health, community needs, and cultural preservation. In addition to resistance, the Subanen have engaged in collaborative initiatives to promote sustainable development while safeguarding their heritage. Partnerships with environmental NGOs, academic institutions, and government agencies have enabled the introduction of community-based forestry programs, ecotourism, and organic agricultural projects. These programs integrate traditional practices with modern conservation techniques, fostering economic opportunities without compromising ecological and cultural integrity. Youth involvement is particularly emphasized, with younger generations trained in sustainable farming, ecological monitoring, and environmental advocacy, ensuring continuity of both knowledge and values. Rituals, storytelling, and cultural ceremonies are incorporated into these initiatives to maintain spiritual connections to the land and reinforce the moral imperative of stewardship. By combining resistance, advocacy, and collaboration, the Subanen have created a model of sustainable development rooted in indigenous wisdom. Their approach illustrates that protecting the environment is inseparable from protecting culture, community, and dignity. The Subanen experience offers a compelling lesson. When development respects ancestral knowledge and legal rights, it becomes not a source of conflict, but a mechanism for empowerment, resilience, and sustainable prosperity for generations to come. In recent decades, the Subanen have experienced a remarkable cultural renaissance, emphasizing the revival and preservation of ancestral rituals and spiritual practices. These ceremonies, traditionally led by the balyan, remain central to community life, marking critical life events such as birth, marriage, harvest, and death. During these rituals, offerings, chants, and dances are performed to honor ancestors, spirits of rivers and forests, and the natural forces that sustain life. The revival is driven not only by spiritual devotion, but also by a conscious effort to strengthen communal identity in the face of modern pressures, such as urbanization, migration, and external cultural influence. Elders actively mentor younger generations, ensuring that knowledge of rituals, chants, and sacred symbolism is transmitted accurately. Storytelling accompanies ritual practice, providing historical context, moral lessons, and guidance for ethical living. This revival has reinforced the Subanen's sense of belonging, fostering pride in their heritage while providing a framework for navigating contemporary challenges. By embedding historical knowledge into spiritual and cultural practices, the Subanen ensure that every generation internalizes lessons of resilience, respect, and community solidarity, maintaining a living link to their ancestral past while equipping youth to face modern realities. Language and art form another cornerstone of the Subanen cultural renaissance. The Subanen language, spoken across families and communities, carries not only daily communication, but also intricate knowledge of history, agriculture, and ecology. Language revitalization efforts include teaching children to speak fluently, documenting oral histories, and creating literary works in Subanen dialects. This linguistic preservation ensures that cultural knowledge embedded in vocabulary, expressions, and stories is not lost. Artistic expression, particularly weaving, beadwork, wood carving, and music, has also seen a revival. Weaving patterns often encode ancestral narratives and spiritual symbolism, while beadwork represents lineage, identity, and social connection. Musical instruments and traditional dances are performed during festivals and rituals, serving both ceremonial and educational purposes. By promoting language and art, the Subanen not only celebrate cultural identity, but also create avenues for economic empowerment through the sale of crafts, ecotourism, and cultural performances. This dual focus on cultural pride and practical sustainability demonstrates that preserving heritage is a dynamic process, blending tradition with innovation, and ensuring that the Subanen remain visible, respected, and resilient in a rapidly changing world. A central aspect of the cultural renaissance is the engagement of youth in preserving and promoting Subanen identity. Recognizing that the survival of traditions depends on intergenerational continuity, elders, educators, and community leaders mentor young people in rituals, language, environmental stewardship, and social governance. Youth councils participate in community decision-making, cultural documentation projects, and advocacy campaigns, fostering leadership skills grounded in Subanen values of respect, patience, and unity. Community gatherings and festivals are designed to involve all age groups, reinforcing cohesion and collective responsibility. Educational programs combine formal schooling with cultural teachings, ensuring that young Subanen can navigate modern society without losing connection to ancestral knowledge. This emphasis on youth empowerment strengthens resilience against cultural erosion, discrimination, and environmental threats, demonstrating a proactive approach to identity preservation. The Subanen philosophy is clear. Culture is not merely inherited. It must be actively lived, shared, and defended. By revitalizing rituals, language, art, and community governance, the Subanen ensure that future generations inherit not only ancestral lands, but also the wisdom, values, and pride necessary to maintain autonomy, peace, and dignity in an evolving world. In the post-independence era of the Philippines, the Subanen recognized that participation in local governance was crucial to protecting their rights, ancestral domains, and cultural integrity. Historically guided by councils of elders and the data system, Subanen communities adapted these traditional leadership structures to interact with modern political institutions. Engagement began with voting in municipal and provincial elections, ensuring that Subanen voices influence decisions affecting land, resources, and social services. Leaders from the Subanen community often ran for local office or were appointed to consultative positions, bridging the gap between indigenous governance and government bureaucracy. This early participation required careful navigation, as external political systems often fail to understand or respect customary laws and traditions. The Subanen emphasized negotiation, unity, and strategic advocacy, ensuring that engagement enhanced autonomy rather than diluted identity. By combining traditional authority with modern political channels, they secured a seat at the table where policies affecting ancestral domains, education, and economic development were decided. This period also reinforced the principle that political knowledge and representation are as critical to community resilience as legal literacy or spiritual guidance, creating a foundation for subsequent advocacy under national legislation like the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act. As awareness of national legislation and indigenous rights grew, the Subanen became more proactive in policy advocacy, asserting influence over decisions impacting ancestral lands, natural resources, and cultural preservation. Communities organized delegations to meet with government agencies, including the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, NCP, to ensure compliance with free, prior, and informed consent, FPC, provisions. Legal literacy programs were introduced within communities to educate elders, youth, and emerging leaders about their rights under the law, including protection from displacement, exploitation, and discrimination. These efforts extended to lobbying for environmental protection, equitable access to social services, and recognition of indigenous practices in public education. Subanen representatives collaborated with other indigenous groups to form networks, amplifying their voices at regional and national levels. This advocacy was strategic and sustained, emphasizing diplomacy and legal recourse while preserving communal harmony. By doing so, the Subanen demonstrated that political engagement is an extension of their peace-loving principles. Negotiation, collective action, and legal empowerment can achieve justice without resorting to violence. Their success in influencing policy and asserting rights reflects the integration of traditional governance values with modern legal and political mechanisms, creating a dynamic model of indigenous participation in contemporary society. Despite progress, the Subanen continue to face challenges in political engagement. Systemic biases, limited access to formal education, and external pressures from commercial and political interests occasionally undermine representation. Decision-making structures sometimes marginalize indigenous voices, especially in municipalities with mixed populations or competing interests. Yet, the Subanen persist, relying on unity, documentation of ancestral claims, and alliances with civil society organizations to maintain influence. Elders and youth work together to prepare the next generation of leaders, ensuring continuity in advocacy and governance. Community assemblies and participatory decision-making reinforce cohesion and transparency, making sure that collective action represents the will of the people. Importantly, these struggles highlight a core Subanen principle. Peace is not passive submission, and respect must be mutual. Through legal advocacy, cultural preservation, and political participation, the Subanen assert their identity, safeguard ancestral lands, and uphold dignity. Their experience demonstrates that effective political engagement is rooted in preparation, knowledge, and solidarity, blending centuries-old governance traditions with contemporary civic strategies. By maintaining these principles, the Subanen ensure that their communities remain resilient, self-determined, and capable of navigating both the opportunities and threats of modern society. The Subanen people have long relied on the resources of their ancestral domains to sustain their communities, employing strategies that combine practical knowledge with ethical stewardship. Historically, rivers provided fish, transportation, and irrigation for rice paddies, while upland forests supplied timber, medicinal plants, and materials for crafts. Agriculture was rotational and diversified, designed to maintain soil fertility and prevent overexploitation. Community members observed strict customs regulating resource use, ensuring that forests and rivers were not depleted and that sacred sites remained untouched. Hunting and gathering were guided by rituals and taboos, instilling respect for the ecosystem and ensuring ecological balance. These traditional practices were not merely survival mechanisms. They were embedded in the moral and spiritual fabric of Subanen society. Elders transmitted ecological knowledge through oral history, ritual, and storytelling, ensuring that each generation understood both the practical and symbolic significance of sustainable living. Even as external pressures from commercial logging, mining, and modern development emerged, the Subanen's grounding in these traditional systems allowed them to assess the impact of new economic activities critically, preserving a continuity of values that emphasizes both environmental protection and community welfare. In response to increasing pressures from modern society, the Subanen gradually adapted their economic strategies, integrating traditional practices with market-oriented approaches. Cooperative farming, ecotourism, and artisanal craft production became key avenues for generating income while maintaining cultural integrity. Weaving, beadwork, and wood carving were marketed to tourists and collectors, allowing communities to benefit economically from traditional arts without compromising authenticity. Subanen agricultural products, including rice, vegetables, and forest goods, were organized into cooperative networks to access regional markets, ensuring fair pricing and share benefits. These initiatives often required negotiation and collaboration with local government units, NGOs, and development agencies, highlighting the Subanen's ability to blend tradition with contemporary practices. Importantly, economic adaptation was guided by ethical considerations. Exploitation, environmental degradation, or activities that threatened sacred spaces were rejected, reflecting the Subanen principle that prosperity should coexist with ecological sustainability and cultural respect. By balancing traditional knowledge with modern market demands, the Subanen demonstrated resilience, ingenuity, and foresight, ensuring that livelihoods support both present needs and the long-term welfare of future generations. Community solidarity remains central to economic strategy. Decisions regarding land use, resource allocation, and development projects are made collectively, guided by elders and local leaders to ensure fairness and sustainability. Projects such as reforestation, sustainable agriculture, and small-scale community enterprises reinforce both economic resilience and environmental stewardship. Youth engagement in these initiatives is crucial, with younger generations trained in agricultural innovation, ecological monitoring, and craft production while being immersed in traditional values. These programs also serve as platforms for leadership development and civic responsibility, ensuring that economic participation is inseparable from cultural identity and social cohesion. Collaborative ventures with NGOs, academic institutions, and government agencies provide technical assistance, access to markets, and legal support, further strengthening the community's capacity to thrive in the modern economy. Through these approaches, the Subanen illustrate a model of development that is neither extractive nor exploitative. Rather, it integrates traditional wisdom, communal governance, and modern economic tools. Their experience emphasizes that true prosperity is measured not solely in income, but in the sustainability of land, culture, and community well-being, highlighting the Subanen's enduring principle that peace, unity, and stewardship are essential to both survival and advancement. The Subanen have long prioritized holistic approaches to health, combining traditional medicine, spiritual practices, and modern healthcare interventions to maintain community well-being. Historically, the balyan played a critical role as a healer, using herbs, rituals, and spiritual guidance to treat illness, prevent disease, and maintain balance within the body and environment. Sacred plants, river waters, and forest resources were integral to healing practices, reflecting the Subanen belief that physical, spiritual, and ecological health are interconnected. In modern times, this traditional knowledge has been complemented by formal healthcare services provided through local health centers, mobile clinics, and government programs. The Subanen have worked to integrate ancestral practices with modern medicine, ensuring that cultural beliefs are respected while adopting scientifically validated methods. Vaccination drives, maternal health programs, and nutrition campaigns are tailored to local contexts, often facilitated in collaboration with elders to gain community trust and participation. Mental health and social well-being are also emphasized, recognizing that cultural identity, spiritual life, and communal solidarity are essential to overall health. By combining these approaches, the Subanen maintain resilience against disease, malnutrition, and social stress, demonstrating that well-being is not merely a medical issue, but a cultural and communal responsibility deeply intertwined with identity, environment, and heritage. Education in Subanen communities reflects a dual approach: formal schooling to access national opportunities and cultural education to preserve ancestral knowledge. Schools in Subanen areas offer standard curricula, including literacy, numeracy, and modern sciences, while community programs ensure the transmission of language, rituals, history, and environmental wisdom. Elders serve as mentors, teaching younger generations through storytelling, songs, and hands-on participation in farming, weaving, and ceremonial practice. These programs aim to cultivate holistic development, producing youth who are literate, skilled, and culturally grounded. Challenges persist, including occasional discrimination, language barriers, and limited access to higher education in remote areas. In response, communities advocate for inclusive educational policies, multilingual instruction, and culturally relevant materials. Youth engagement is central. Students participate in cultural documentation projects, environmental stewardship programs, and leadership initiatives, blending practical skills with cultural knowledge. By fostering education that respects both modern competencies and ancestral traditions, the Subanen ensure that the next generation is equipped to navigate contemporary society while maintaining the values, identity, and ethical frameworks that define their communities. Beyond health and education, the Subanen have actively engaged in social programs that strengthen community resilience, equity, and cohesion. Initiatives include cooperative farming projects, sustainable livelihood training, reforestation campaigns, and cultural festivals that promote both social solidarity and economic opportunity. These programs often involve collaboration with government agencies, non-governmental organizations, and academic institutions, leveraging resources and expertise while retaining community leadership and decision-making authority. Particular attention is given to vulnerable populations, women, children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities, ensuring that development is inclusive and equitable. Rituals, storytelling, and cultural activities are integrated into program design, reinforcing identity, moral education, and communal values alongside technical skills. Social programs also serve as platforms for advocacy, teaching communities how to assert their rights under the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA, and other legal frameworks. By combining cultural preservation, practical development, and legal literacy, the Subanen demonstrate a comprehensive model of community well-being that is sustainable, empowering, and respectful of heritage. Their approach illustrates that modern social programs are most effective when they harmonize with traditional values, ensuring that development strengthens identity, unity, and resilience rather than undermining it. Today, the Subanen people stand as a testament to resilience, cultural continuity, and the enduring power of unity. Generations have faced external pressures, from colonial rule to Japanese occupation, from modern development to social discrimination. Yet the Subanen have preserved their identity, values, and traditions. Central to this resilience is the deep connection to ancestral lands, which are more than mere territories. They are repositories of history, spirituality, and ecological knowledge. Communities maintain traditional governance structures led by datu and councils of elders, balancing customary laws with modern legal frameworks such as the Indigenous Peoples Rights Act, IPRA. Cultural practices, rituals, and ceremonies continue to define the rhythm of life, guiding ethical behavior, ecological stewardship, and communal harmony. Language preservation, artistic expression, and storytelling ensure that knowledge and values are transmitted to younger generations, fostering pride and identity. Education and youth engagement further strengthen this foundation, equipping new leaders with the skills to navigate contemporary challenges while remaining grounded in Subanen ethics. The Subanen demonstrate that peace is not passive submission, but an active principle. It is maintained through vigilance, wisdom, legal literacy, and cultural cohesion. Their continued survival and prosperity reflect centuries of strategic adaptation, moral clarity, and communal solidarity, offering a model of how indigenous communities can thrive while preserving heritage and dignity in a modern world. Despite resilience, the Subanen continue to face significant challenges in contemporary society. Logging, mining, and large-scale development projects threaten ecosystems and sacred spaces, while climate change introduces new environmental vulnerabilities. Social discrimination and inequities in education, healthcare, and employment persist, requiring vigilance and proactive engagement. Political pressures sometimes complicate local governance, necessitating careful negotiation and legal advocacy to protect rights and resources. Yet, the Subanen respond strategically, combining traditional knowledge with modern tools. Community monitoring, environmental assessment, and legal recourse under FPSC provisions ensure that projects respect both the land and the people. Social programs, sustainable economic ventures, and cultural initiatives reinforce cohesion and resilience. The Subanen philosophy remains consistent. Kindness and peace are offered, but respect is demanded. Violation of rights is met not with violence, but with unity, legal action, and assertive advocacy. By integrating culture, law, and community action, the Subanen navigate modern pressures without compromising their identity, demonstrating that enduring resilience depends not only on adaptation, but also on moral and cultural grounding, communal decision-making, and proactive defense of ancestral heritage. Looking to the future, the Subanen envision a society that honors ancestral wisdom while embracing sustainable development, education, and social equity. Their strategy emphasizes preservation of cultural and ecological heritage alongside participation in modern governance, economic systems, and educational opportunities. Youth engagement remains central, ensuring continuity of knowledge, leadership, and cultural pride. Environmental stewardship is integrated into community planning, balancing traditional practices with contemporary conservation science. Legal literacy and advocacy ensure that rights are actively protected, empowering communities to negotiate on equal terms with government and commercial entities. The Subanen's vision is one of harmonious coexistence, peace with outsiders who respect their identity and culture, assertive defense against exploitation or discrimination, and a society where ancestral lands, traditions, and values are not only protected but celebrated. Their story illustrates a profound lesson. True strength lies in the combination of kindness, unity, cultural pride, legal awareness, and strategic action. The Subanen today are gentle in spirit but unyielding in principle, offering a living example of how indigenous communities can thrive in the modern world while honoring centuries of history, resilience, and moral wisdom. Theirs is a vision of peace that is active, dignified, and enduring, an inspiration for all who value justice, culture, and human integrity. And that concludes our journey into the history of the Subanen people. Today, we witnessed their enduring resilience, their deep connection to ancestral lands, their vibrant culture, and the wisdom that guided them through centuries of challenge, from colonization and war to modern development pressures and social discrimination. The moral of their story is clear. Peace, kindness, and unity are powerful, but when necessary, knowledge, law, and collective action are equally essential to protect dignity and rights. The Subanen teach us that respecting others, valuing culture, and standing together are the foundations of a strong and harmonious society. If you found this story inspiring, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to History Teller YT for more journeys into the past that uncover lessons we can apply today. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss our next deep dive into history's untold stories. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to bringing you more incredible stories in the next video. Until then, remember, history is not just about the past. It's the guide to understanding our present and shaping our future.